Thanks for downloading this episode of the Boomer and X Show. If you want to help us out, you can get the word out there. You know, we go Facebook, go Twitter, hire one of those guys who spells stuff out in the sky with an airplane. Just get the word out, whatever you got to do.
Liftoff will start in T-minus 10 seconds.
Hey everybody, this is Evan and John, and you're listening to the Boomer and X Show.
The Deal by Jason Yee. She dreamt of a field where the flowers and grass were white, their shapes painted with rosewood. She walked through this field, brushing her palm on the tops of these flowers. Her hands became wet and red, and the bottom of her white dress was soaked. On the horizon, she saw a muted mustard sun setting. She walked towards the sun. The sun became smaller, and within the sun she saw a boy. "Chuck!" she cried out. "Chuck!" The boy had a crimson blanket slung over his shoulders like a cape. She ran towards the boy. "Please, Chuck!" she cried out. She sliced through the red and white field and left a wake of pink puddles. As the sun shrank, it became brighter. As it became brighter, the boy began to disappear. "Chuck, please!" she cried. She pumped her legs harder. Her legs burned. Her lungs burned. Her thoroughly wet sundress burdened her movements. "Please!" she cried. She stretched her arms towards the boy, but the boy fully disappeared within the sun's glow. She tripped over her red and white dress and stumbled forward. The field rushed at her.
She was woken by her plates crashing onto the kitchen floor. She had sweated through her white tank top. The ceiling fan spun on its maximum setting, but it only gave a slight relief from the summer heat. The light from the street lamp squeezed through her tiny window behind the head of her bed. It provided just enough light to allow shadows to be cast about her studio apartment walls. From lying on her back, she could see a shadow that looked like a pine tree, which she knew to be her coat rack. She could see the shadows from her two chairs and her dresser. She laid there for a moment, wondering whether she should clean the fallen and most likely shattered plates or attempt to go back to sleep. She sat up and removed her wet tank top and flung it onto her chairs. She then fell onto her bed. Sleep didn't come to her. She lay in her bed trying to remember what she dreamt. All she remembered was a white field and the feeling of dread. The dread was deeper than any dread she felt in her life. She felt as though she made a terrible mistake that could never be taken back. This dread sat so heavily in her stomach, it tightened her chest and limbs. She turned to her side and grabbed her phone that lay on her hardwood floor. The phone displayed 1:40 in the morning and a message from her fiancé. The message stated, "Good luck on your finals." She replied, "Thanks." She then placed her phone back on the floor and closed her eyes. She theorized her dread may stem from her upcoming law school exams. She tried to wear this justification, but it just didn't fit comfortably. As a matter of fact, nothing felt comfortable, she thought. Everything, including the commonplace city noise, just felt off. She heard cars driving by her apartment and a distant siren. She heard men and women stumbling home. They yelled, they laughed, they fought. She recalled the quiet of her small Minnesota town. There was no noise at night, except for the occasional freight train horn. She remembered when she was a child, she would look out her bedroom window and watch the snow slowly accumulate on her father's 21-year-old pickup truck. It ran until she graduated from high school, which was also when her parents separated. Her father would beam if you inquire about his truck. After going through a list of previous truck self-repairs, he boasted how his truck saved his life when a speeding sedan smashed into him during a Minnesota blizzard. And if it was not for his truck and the accident, her father explained, he would have never met her mother, who was working as a nurse in the Twin Cities. Her mother, on the other hand, would sigh and roll her eyes when her father talked about his truck. Her mother would later, usually in her bedroom, confided a list of her father's inadequacies to her. Her mother would wonder out loud how her father would have been if it wasn't for that damn pickup truck. She hated her mother, but as she grew older she noticed the dinginess of their ranch house. The charm of the old truck became an embarrassment to her during high school. She started to see her father's limp as a weakness, and she too started to criticize her father's inadequacies. She ran to college and law school to do whatever in her power to accomplish what her father did not, and to never be inadequate to anyone.
She was running through the white field. The sun was high in the sky and bright. Her hair was wet with sweat, and her white sundress clung to her body. In the horizon she saw a small figure that looked like a boy standing on a table. She ran to the figure, but as she neared him, her feet sank into the field as if it was made of quicksand. She struggled and plodded through the white field until she was a couple of yards from the boy-like figure. The boy-like figure had his back to her. "This is not my Chuck," she murmured to herself. He was short, maybe 3 feet tall. He was thin, and he had almost no torso, just skinny arms and legs. The figure, however, had a very large spherical head, 4 or 5 times larger than the rest of his body. He had the shape of a marble balanced on top of a vertical needle. He wore a tiny black suit that shimmered in the sun. He wore no shoes. His feet were thin, but almost as long as his legs, and half their lengths were made up by his toes. His toenails were more like talons than human nails, sharp and hooked that looked like they were made for gripping and tearing flesh. His skin had the color of concrete, gray and pock-marked with black spots. She imagined his skin would also feel as rough as concrete. The figure was bald and he had small button ears. There were piles of stacked gold coins on the picnic table, on the benches, and some on the field. On the table, the gold coins surrounded the figure and one large black stock pot with a black lid. There was a sudden crack of thunder. She looked up and saw no clouds, just a beaming sun. Another inexplicable thunder boomed, and then a few flakes materialized in the sky and started to float down. When the white flakes touched her skin, she felt a deep cold that pierced through her skin and invaded her muscles and bones. She shivered. More flakes fell from the sky, and they started to bury her. She shook and brushed the flakes from her, but to no avail. They continued to bury her. She attempted to move closer to the picnic table, which had not been covered with snow. The flakes were coming down heavy, and they impaired her vision. She could only see glimpses of the table, the gold, and the stock pot, and the figure through the flurry of white. "Please help," she shouted. The figure began to turn towards her, and the dread and uneasiness that fermented in her gut burst into a panic.
She woke to find she was laying in a fetal position, shaking. The bedsheet was wrapped around her, and with both hands she was clenching the sheet under her chin. She threw her sheets off to the side. She felt goosebumps all over her body. Was she sick? She questioned. She sat up and swung her legs out of bed. She leaned forward and picked up her cell phone. The cell phone glowed 311. She sighed and placed her phone back on the floor. She slid out of bed and shuffled to her dresser on the other side of the room. The room was dark, but it was bright enough so she could find her way to her dresser without pawing blindly in the dark. She noticed that some of her plates had indeed shattered across the floor. She sighed. She was too tired, but she didn't want to be exhausted for her finals. She opened her top drawer and blindly grabbed a t-shirt. She pulled the oversized t-shirt over her head and shuffled back to her bed. Halfway to her bed, something brushed past her left ankle. She simultaneously shrieked and shot her left leg up in the air. She felt her heart furiously beat in her upper chest. Any feeling of fatigue quickly vanished. What the hell was that? She nervously wondered. She took a deep breath and leapt towards her bed. When she landed on her left foot, she felt a sharp, searing pain. She yelped and collapsed into her bed. The street light revealed blood gushing from what remained of her big toe. "Oh no! Oh no!" she yelled. She crumpled her bedsheet and pressed it hard against her gushing toe. She screamed. The bleeding didn't stop, and her toe bled through the sheet. She felt woozy and lightheaded. While still pressing the sheet on her toe, she leaned to her right and picked up her phone. The blood on her hand smeared the phone's screen, and she could not find the dialer icon. The whir of her ceiling fan became low-frequency hums. The sound was soothing, and it calmed her. Whatever light remained in the room dimmed. The heat of the room also seemed to have been turned down. A comfortable warmth blanketed her. She felt more relaxed as the world became more muted. She laid on her side. She struggled to hold onto her phone, and on the verge of succumbing to the darkness, she found her fiancé's quick dial icon on her phone. With her bloody thumb, she pressed it, but nothing happened. She pressed the icon again, and the phone finally dialed her fiancé. Hello? Her fiancé sleepily answered. Carlos, help, call, 911, blood, dark, a lot. She slurred. What? Hold on, Carlos pleaded. She dropped her phone. The floor began to shift and bend like melting candle wax. Within the peripherals of the closing darkness, she thought she saw something scurry into the puddles of blood on the floor. She moaned and closed her eyes.
And I saw her toe in the vermin's mouth, the goblin-like figure exclaimed. She laughed, but then she paused suddenly, realizing she had forgotten the joke's setup and where she was. She muttered. She confusedly looked around. In her right hand was a bitten peach. Its juices ran down her hand and forearm and dripped onto her lap. She was sitting at the pine picnic table that was splintered and cracked, beaten from the snow, rain, heat, and cold. The table was in a white field that stretched out to the horizons. The lack of topography and the vast expanse of the field made her feel as though this picnic table was the center of the universe. The sun was either setting or rising. She wasn't sure which. The picnic table was strewn with a wide array of vegetables and fruits. Piles of pears, peaches, persimmons, parsnips, red and green grapes, greens, leeks, and carrots. In the middle of the table, there was a large black stock pot with a black lid that rocked up and down as steam escaped from the pot. She didn't see any fire underneath the pot. How strange, she thought. Standing on the table in front of her, there was a smiling goblin-like figure. The figure had a large spherical head on a pin-thin body. He had large green eyes, a stout but sharp nose, thin lips, and a very large mouth that was nearly extended from ear to ear. His large smile revealed hundreds of tiny, yellow-stained incisors. "Are you all right, my dear?" the figure questioned. Yes. I was just confused for a bit," she answered. The figure frowned. The largeness of the figure's facial features exaggerated the emotions he conveyed. A smile didn't just convey happiness, but an extreme joy. And similarly, his frown didn't just convey worry or disappointment, but a profound sadness. The figure's angry face would have been terrifying, she thought. "I'm sorry, Mr. Medford, is it?" she asked. "Yes, my dear. You look terribly disoriented," Mr. Medford said. "I am the one who should apologize for my, no doubt, obscene and at the very least inappropriate joke. And most of all, apologize for being such a crude guest." Mr. Medford apologized. "No, I just totally blanked. Yes, my dear, it is quite normal. I have had many times where I have blanked. On one occasion in front of a lord. I stood in front of him mumbling and bumbling with ums and uhs. How embarrassing. I attribute my lack of articulation from my missing tongue and the overwhelming emotions caused by my lord. Perhaps you are missing a tongue or overwhelmed with emotions?" "No, Mr. Medford, I have my tongue. You must have just made me laugh so hard I just forgot things." "Well, you are too kind. Thank you, my dear. Now, what did you think of that peach? Is it not the most juicy, sweetest peach?" She raised her peach and took a bite. The peach juice exploded into her mouth and ran down her chin and neck. The sweetness was like honey. She wiped the juice from her face with her forearm. "Mr. Medford, this peach is awesome. It's out of this world," she exclaimed. "Thank you, my dear. Well, my stew is almost done. If you like the peach, you will love my stew. It is too unworldly." "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Medford, I don't eat meat. I'm a vegetarian." "You do not eat meat? How odd." Mr. Medford had a look of profound sadness. "Well, I suppose I will have to eat all my delicious stew by myself," he stated. His pointed, slender tongue licked the entire length of his upper teeth. "Mr. Medford, I see you grew a new tongue," she exclaimed. "Oh my, you are quite observant. Yes, I did grow a new tongue, and this one is much better than the old," Mr. Medford replied. Mr. Medford sauntered to the stock pot. His talons scratched and loudly rapped against the top of the picnic table. He took off the lid. The smell of meat and spices filled her nostrils, and she began to salivate. Mr. Medford, with his other hand, reached into the pot and pulled out, between two slender fingers, a big toe-sized cube of meat. As Mr. Medford slowly placed the meat into his gaping mouth, the meat dripped rendered fat and other juices onto the table and on his black shimmering suit jacket. He slowly chewed the meat with his large eyes closed. Mr. Medford had a look of profound ecstasy. He swallowed and opened his eyes. Mr. Medford then placed the lid back onto the pot and turned back towards her. "Wonderful," Mr. Medford exclaimed. "It sure smells good," she said. "Oh, it was more than good, my dear. It was unworldly. I cannot eat anything else. Bah to your roasted and grilled meats. Stewed meats of young beans are magnificent. Well, my dear, I have loved your company, but your time is short. We must get our deal done before the sun sets. You have invited me to your pleasant home, and now I must ask, what do you seek from me?" "I have everything I want, and I think I am on the right path." "Oh, I see. I am most content that you do not wish anything from me, and that you only called me so that we may converse and enjoy each other's company. But I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to mess up my plan. I don't want any hiccups or bumps or other unforeseen events." "Ah, how marvelously determined, self-reliant, and confident you are. You don't ask for riches, power, or love, but you ask that you may fulfill your will. I have met many who sought riches, power, or love without labor or sacrifice. I will grant you your wish, and I will whisper to you on how this must be done. You must follow every word, and if you stray, uncertainty and cataclysm will most likely befall you. But I must ask, can you not live without your plan?" "No." "Wonderful." Mr. Medford bent close to her and whispered her fate to her. He smelled of pine, dark chocolate, and lemon to her. After he was done whispering, they laughed and told stories. They ate fruit and Mr. Medford's delicious stew.
So, John, what do you think of the story so far?
Well, we have really the main and really only character, real life character, Margaret. It's all about Margaret. She's ambitious.
Yeah, she doesn't want fame, riches, or anything. She just wants what she has planned to happen.
Right.
Yeah. So, is she in a dream, or is this all really happening? What do you think?
Well, she's dreaming.
So she's dreaming.
Because of the physical characteristics of Mr. Medford isn't something that really exists in the world that I know of. So that has to be.
I think he's actually visiting her, because he always says we're on otherworldly. So he's like actually visiting.
He
her.
does like that. He does like that word.
And okay, let me ask you this: do you think she cut her foot on a plate, or he cut her toe off?
He cut it.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, you just said it was a dream, but now he's cutting our full toe.
Nightmare on Elm Street. I have, because things going to that movie, and things were happening in dream state, but yet they were.
You think that's what Jason Yee was going for?
Yes. Yeah. Now, I don't know if he's ever seen Nightmare on Elm Street. It probably predates Jason Lee.
Yee. Yeah, you said Lee.
Did I? But I mean, as I'm reading this, and as we decided to do this, that was one of the first things that came to my mind. It's
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, it's similar to that.
Yeah, you're right. So let's get back into it.
All right.
She woke up in a hospital bed. Her head was throbbing. A blood bag was attached to her arm, and her left foot was bandaged. Carlos was sitting in a chair next to her, reading the news on his phone. "Carlos?" she groaned. Carlos turned to her. Carlos had a round and plump face with a short boxed beard. He had chestnut hair that partially covered his hazel eyes. "Margie!" Carlos happily exclaimed. He then grabbed her hand. "What happened?" "Geez, you scared me. I came into your room with the paramedics. There was blood everywhere. I mean, everywhere. They were smashed plates. It looked like you got into some fight." "There was no fight. I think I cut my toe on one of those plates." "Yeah, we saw there wasn't any scratches on you and that your, toe was missing." "What?" "Yeah, your toe. It's missing. At first, the paramedics thought you sliced it off yourself, 'cause they don't know how you could have cut your toe off like that, and they couldn't believe how much you bled. I couldn't believe it, too. You must have cut some kind of artery. You didn't find it?" "No, I'm sorry. After they stabilized you, I went back in your apartment, and I cleaned. I couldn't find it. I looked under the bed and everything." "Ah, did I miss my finals?" "Yeah, but don't worry. I talked to the school, and they're going to let you take your finals in 3 weeks. Thanks, Carlos, for everything." "Don't sweat it, Margie. Just get better. I love you." "Thanks, Carlos." Margie closed her eyes and went back to sleep. She dreamt of the Minnesota woods. In a pine forest clearing, Margie stood knee-deep in snow, cradling 3-year-old sleeping Charles in her arms. A Minnesota blizzard raged all around Margaret and her child. Margaret was only wearing her white nightgown, which was soaked with melted snow, and a red down jacket. Charles was swaddled in a crimson blanket. For a moment, the wind became still, and the snow just gently fell from the night sky. Margaret looked down at her child and apologized. She didn't shed a tear. She'd shed them all the night before. This was the deal. It was my fate, Margaret thought, and she shuddered and wept dryly. Then a gust rushed from the sky and nearly knocked Margaret to her knees. The gust revealed a smiling crevice in front of Margaret. The crevice was long and curved, much like Mr. Medford's gaping, hungry mouth. The crevice howled and screeched. "Oh, my Chuck!" she wailed. "Please, Mr. Medford, please," she pleaded. As if in response, the crevice roared loudly. Margaret moaned and wailed, and she hugged her child for the last time. Then she threw her child into Mr. Medford's mouth. The sun was setting over the pine forest. Craig removed his mittens and placed them in his snowsuit cargo pockets. He then took out a pack of spearmint gum from his pocket. The Minnesota January, cold instantaneously numbing his fingers, which made unwrapping the piece of gum difficult. Craig finally unwrapped his piece of gum and popped it in his mouth. "Hey, Craig, can I have one?" his partner asked. Craig rolled his eyes and stared at his partner with disdain. "Are you serious, Josh?" Craig replied. "Yeah, please. You really need to stop mooching off of me." Craig tossed his pack of gum to Josh. As Josh fumbled with the pack, he asked, "You think we'll ever find him?" "Dunno," Craig replied. His partner unwrapped a piece of gum, and he was now happily chewing. "We should probably head back to the cabin. It's getting late, and I don't want to be stuck out in these woods all night," Craig told his partner. "That kid is dead," Josh blurted. Craig pondered this a bit. "Yeah, probably," he replied. "Then why in the hell are we out here for over 3 weeks?" "Well, for one thing, the kid is Congresswoman Margaret's kid." Craig recalled the Congresswoman being gaunt and half mad when he first arrived at her cabin. What disturbed him the most was her constant lip biting. Often it would bleed and drizzle down her chin. "Yeah, I know, and I don't care. Pfft, politicians. They're soulless. Brr, I'm cold. I would totally sell my soul for some hot chocolate with marshmallows." "What'd you sell yours for?" "My soul? I wouldn't trade it. Hell sounds pretty good in this freeze. Brr. I'm freezing. What the? What? I think What?
Josh started to sprint to the setting sun. "Hey, Josh, what the heck?" Craig yelled. I think I saw that damn kid. He's alive, Josh screamed back. Shoot, Craig said, and he started to chase Josh. Craig weaved through the red pines while attempting to dodge their branches. Josh, hold up, Craig yelled. Craig pumped his legs harder through the packed powder until the snow and ground gave way, and Craig disappeared into an abyss. Craig opened his eyes. He found himself laying on his back in a cave that was dimly lit by a sliver of starlight above him. He tried to sit up, but an intense pain shot through his lower back to his legs. He screamed. Craig rummaged through his jacket and found his pocket flashlight. He switched on his light. Craig saw that he was in a crevice pit with over 30 feet sheer walls. Sharp rocks littered the cave ground. He saw his legs were twisted and bent. To his right, about 2 feet away, he saw a red bundle with a tiny leg emerging from it. The calf muscle was torn from the bone, and the flesh looked like it had tiny bites taken from it. He realized he would also suffer the same fate as the kid, except his death would likely be long and painful as he starved. Help! Help! Please help me! Craig desperately yelled. He continued to scream for help until his voice was hoarse, but he heard no response except for the howling wind above him. Craig wished he had his brains splattered on the rocks. He wished his body wasn't broken. He wished to live. He struggled and fought to sit up. He screamed through clenched teeth. The excruciating pain and stress caused him to vomit blood and the remnants of his lunch. Craig collapsed in exhaustion and passed out with vomit frozen on his mouth and neck. When he awoke, the sunlight was shining on his face. He was overcome with warmth. His stomach growled and his mouth salivated as he smelled the spices and cooked meat.
So, Margaret's a congresswoman now.
She was ambitious.
She got, obviously, her deal worked. She got what she wanted. But poor little Chuck.
Didn't stand in the way of what she wanted.
She sacrificed her own kid.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, she's a politician now. She's obviously successful and all this, but she seems to be a little crazy. She says half mad when Craig and them visit her, I guess.
So is Mr. Lee trying to say that a woman can't vote? Is Mr. Lee saying that a woman cannot? Yee. I'm not.
You're saying Lee.
Oh my God. Is Mr. Yee saying that a woman cannot be both a mother and a successful career person
without making some kind of crazy sacrifice?
Well,
it might be. I haven't thought about this story. Like, in the real world, is that what he's getting at?
A feminist would read this story and go nuts.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Because saying that...
Oh, I got to sacrifice my kid to be a congresswoman.
To be right.
So, I didn't think about it like that.
that's what he's saying here.
Yeah, I guess so. But, I haven't even looked at it under that light, that he's trying to convey that you have to give up something for this.
Well,
women can't have a kid to be this successful. Essentially, is what he's trying to get.
That's what she had to give up in order to meet her goals, her aspirations in life.
So poor Chuck, poor Craig. Obviously, Craig's gonna die like little Chuck did. But did someone sacrifice him?
He seems like he sacrificed himself. He just made a wish.
He did. He just kind of half-heartedly made a wish.
Yeah, hell would sound kind of good right now. So.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for.
Well, I guess.
I like it.
Yeah.
So hopefully our attempt at entertaining you for this half hour, whatever, 45 minutes, was successful.
The first annual
inaugural.
Inaugural.
No, it's inaugural.
Okay, so
first time.
You can't say the first annual?
No, it's, I guess, not.
I think you can.
No.
It could be either.
I think you're wrong.
I think it can be either. I think you can say the first annual as long as it's repeated.
So if it's not repeated, you got to go back in time and change the grammar.
Well, then you just say it just, hey, we did this one and done. But we'll
I think
say
it is the first time you do something, it's inaugural.
Okay, all right. We just inaugurated.
Cool.
The inaugural Boomer and X spooky story Halloween read. That's what we just did.
The first inaugural.
Well, no. First inaugural is redundant.
The inaugural. Inaugural's horror fiction Boomer and X attempt.
And we didn't talk about sports at all in this.
Hey, that's true. All right, let's wrap this up.
Happy Halloween, everybody.